At times, it feels like the aerial battle between Russia and Ukraine has evolved into a series of tit-for-tat strikes. Russia unleashes its drones and missiles, targeting Ukraine's cities and infrastructure, in addition to inevitably killing some of Ukraine's civilians. Ukraine then responds with its own drones and sometimes missiles, though its strikes focus more heavily on vital Russian military assets. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And on November 26th, the news broke that Ukraine had delivered another powerful shot to Russia in response to one of Russia's raids. This was a big one. Ukraine has crippled Vladimir Putin's arsenal in a massive revenge strike for Kyiv. That strike, Euromaidan press reports, was carried out against a drone and missile plant located in Cheboksary, which is in Russia's Chuvash Republic. This isn't a border region that Ukraine can easily target. The facility is about 1,000 kilometers or just over 620 miles from Ukraine's border with Russia. With such a massive distance for its drones to travel, Ukraine would have to plan carefully and execute perfectly to hit its target. Ukraine did just that, and the target was the VNIIR Progress factory in Cheboksary that is responsible for building Global Navigation Satellite System or GNSS receivers that are used in a host of weapons that Russia has been launching at Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Russia's missiles and drones need these receivers, along with the antennas that are also made at the facility, to pick up signals from GPS, GLONASS, and Galileo satellite navigation systems. Plus, Ukraine's factory strike also saw it target a facility that builds the Kometa navigation module, which is installed in several of Russia's weapons. Which weapons? We'll tell you in a moment. First, it's important to confirm that this isn't a rumored strike. Ukraine itself has publicly revealed what it pulled off in Cheboksary via the Telegram channel operated by the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. On the night of November 26th, operators of the 1st Separate SBS Center, transformed from the 14th Separate UAV Regiment of the Unmanned Systems Forces, in cooperation with the Defense Forces, struck the VNIIR Progress enterprise in the city of Cheboksary, Chuvash Republic, Russia, the Unmanned Systems Forces declared, before highlighting the tangible results of the work its drones had done. As a result of the strike, explosions and a fire were recorded on the factory premises. The detailed consequences of the damage are being clarified, the forces said before concluding, "The forces of the unmanned systems are consistently reducing the enemy's ability to continue aggression against Ukraine." And reducing is the right word. What Ukraine has just destroyed is far more vital to Putin's war machine than it might initially appear. The GNSS receivers that are now melting in the flames of VNIIR Progress factory are used in many of Russia's most lethal missiles and drones, including the country's Shahed unmanned aerial vehicles and the Kalibr cruise missiles that Russia has fired in droves at Ukraine's cities. They're not the only Russian weapons that rely on these receivers either. Iskander-M, Kh-69 and S-8000 Banderol missiles all use them too. So do Russia's 4-post and Orlan-10 drones. Oh, and do you remember the Kometa navigation modules we mentioned earlier? Those modules are resistant to electronic warfare, and they're all installed alongside the GNSS receivers. Ukraine has just completed what may be one of its smartest strikes during the entire war, attempting to take out Russia's missiles and drones directly as a fool's errand. Russia is now producing up to 2,700 Shahed-type drones monthly, likely across many facilities. Missile production statistics are harder to come by, but you can guarantee that Russia will guard those types of facilities with as many air defense systems as it can spare. Rather than trying to take out such large and imposing targets, Ukraine has gone after the one thing that all of those projectiles need to get to where they need to go. Russia's missile and drone navigation systems have been destroyed, and it will take time for the country to restart production. Without those systems, Russia can't build more of the projectiles it needs to maintain its overwhelming aerial strategy in Ukraine. It can still build the missile and drone shells, it can even load those projectiles with warheads, but it can't do anything with them when the systems that tell these weapons where they need to go are nowhere to be found. All of this would be impressive enough if the destruction of part of one of Russia's most important factories was the only thing that Ukraine achieved on the night of November 26th, but it isn't. There's more. In its report on Ukraine's strike against Russia's Shahed and Kalibr facilities, RBC Ukraine noted that Ukraine's drones took out several Russian targets within occupied Ukraine. Among them was a command post of Russia's 58th Combined Arms Army, which was stationed in the Vasilivka region of occupied Zaporizhia. In Mariupol, Ukraine managed to take out an M1 anti-aircraft missile system, which may have created a safe aerial corridor for future drone strikes in the region. A gathering of troops in the Pokrovsk direction was also dismantled by one of Ukraine's drones. And in Donetsk, Ukraine also took out ammunition depots in Kamyanka and Ocheretina. Ukraine was busy on November 26th. And it wasn't just looking to cause as much damage to Russia's war machine as it possibly could. Of course, it has achieved just that. If the VNIIR Progress factory strike forces a slowdown in Russia's missile and drone strikes, even if only for a few days, that's crucial for Ukraine. As for the strikes on occupied territory, Ukraine is limiting Russia's offensive options in the Donetsk region, in addition to tackling the Russian defenses. This is all important work designed to limit the impact of Russia's unrelenting, slow push deeper into Ukraine. However, there was something else that motivated Ukraine's latest strike. A force that is as powerful as any desire to weaken the Russian offensive: revenge. Ukraine delivered that revenge in spades in a drone strike that appears to be a natural response to yet another Russian attack that targeted the Ukrainian capital city of Kyiv. Just the day before Ukraine's strike, The Guardian reported that Russia had launched a devastating overnight attack on Kyiv, killing 7 civilians and injuring a further 21. That attack added fresh doubt, as though there wasn't enough already, on the idea that Putin is in any way serious about taking a new round of US-brokered peace talks in Abu Dhabi seriously. Russia always claims that it wants peace, but it kills as many Ukrainian civilians as it can, even as peace negotiations are ongoing. As of July 31, 2025, 13,883 Ukrainian civilians have died due to Russia's brutal approach to its invasion, with a further 35,548 civilians suffering injuries. You can likely add several hundred more to both of those totals to account for the many other civilian casualties that Russia's drones and missiles have caused in the nearly 4 months since Statista published these figures. Returning to the Kyiv strike, Russia launched 22 missiles at Ukraine, including 4 of its hypersonic Kinzhal missiles, along with 464 drones. Almost all of this horde targeted Kyiv and the surrounding regions. Russia even managed to claim a fairly high-profile victim in 65-year-old Vadim Tupchi, who was a musician, actor, and set builder. Tupchi's son, Anton, expressed his grief in a social media post where he simply proclaimed, "I hate the world." That statement encapsulates the terror that Russia wants to create in Ukraine. Revenge had to be served. In addition to killing civilians, Russia's massive November 25th strike also targeted the city's energy supplies. Those were likely Putin's main target, with the civilians being collateral damage about which he hasn't cared since he launched his invasion. Reuters reveals that electricity and heating systems were disrupted around Ukraine's capital, which reveals the second reason behind Russia's strike. Putin wants as many Ukrainian civilians as possible to feel the pain of a freezing cold winter without light or heat. These sorts of strikes have already been extremely effective for Russia. On November 9th, The Guardian reported that much of Ukraine faces widespread power cuts as Russia's repeated missile and drone attacks have reduced the country's electricity generating capacity to practically zero. Power cuts lasting for up to 16 hours per day have become common in many regions of Ukraine. Russia's strikes have been so wide-ranging that they've even been targeting electrical substations at nuclear power generation facilities, which is an extremely dangerous game for Putin to play. Russia's missiles and drones have been shown not to always be the most accurate in the world, especially when they're being disrupted by Ukraine's electronic warfare countermeasures. Any one of those weapons going off course has the potential to create a nuclear catastrophe, as Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha explained. Russia is deliberately endangering nuclear safety in Europe. We call for an urgent meeting of the IAEA Board of Governors to respond to these unacceptable risks, Sybiha claimed, as he called for the International Atomic Energy Agency to step in and do something about Russia's reckless strikes. The Russian news agency TASS adds that it estimated the state of Ukraine's power generation capacities in a November 11th report, and the numbers don't look good. Ukraine had 56 gigawatts of capacity before Putin launched his invasion. That has declined by between 39 and 41 gigawatts. That's a 70% reduction, and it means that Ukraine is only generating between 15 and 17 gigawatts of electricity as it enters into a harsh winter, during which Ukraine's consumers need between 16 and 18 gigawatts. Ukraine's power situation seems to be on a knife edge. Putin has planned that all along. Ukraine has also had to deal with Russian attacks on the country's gas facilities that have caused so much damage that the country may have to turn to the US to fulfill the heating needs of its citizens. This according to a November 26th ABC News report which claims that a series of Russian strikes on Ukraine's gas facilities means that the country will have to import an additional 4.4 billion cubic meters of gas for the upcoming winter. This is gas that Ukraine would have previously generated itself, and it's gas that is also going to drain huge amounts of money from Ukraine's war fund. Ukraine has no choice, ABC News notes. The temperatures in some homes in the country can drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius or minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit at the height of winter. These aren't livable conditions. All across Ukraine, families are bracing themselves for even tougher times ahead, a long, cold winter in which Russian President Vladimir Putin attempts to finish off his invasion by striking Ukraine's power supplies and networks, the BBC's diplomatic correspondent James Landale wrote on November 13th. Russia's attacks on Ukrainian energy have grown more intense, more vicious, and thanks to the waves of Shaheds and missiles that Russia launches, they've also become more effective than ever before. Russia's latest strike on Kyiv provides examples of Putin's strategy for damaging Ukraine during the next few months, along with the callous attitude that he displays to the people in the country who aren't actively fighting against Russia's occupying forces. Russia's leader doesn't care how many Ukrainians die, be it due to explosions or the freezing cold, as long as he gets what he wants: total control over Ukraine. Ukraine's strike against the VNIIR Progress factory typifies Ukraine's approach to long-range warfare. Whenever Russia terrorizes Ukraine's people, Ukraine responds by attacking legitimate military targets, the loss of which damages the Russian war machine. But make no mistake about it, the series of strikes that Ukraine conducted on the night of November 26th was revenge for all of the death and destruction that Russia had caused the night before. Ukraine didn't need to kill Russian civilians to send a message to Putin. It just allows Russia's weakened troops and burning factories to send that message for it. That brings us nicely to what the attack on the VNIIR Progress factory means for the war going forward. Right now, we don't know how extensive the damage done to the facility was. Explosions and fires were reported, but that doesn't mean that VNIIR Progress has been taken offline forever. Still, even if the factory is only shut down for a few days as a result of Ukraine's attack, that delay, coupled with the potential destruction of Cometa modules and GNSS receivers, affects two of Russia's most important weapons: Kalibr cruise missiles and Shahed-type drones. Missiles in general have always been a major weapon for Russia in its attempts to both terrorize and level Ukraine. However, 2025 has seen Russia take its missile attacks to a level that hasn't been seen since the early months of the war. On November 1st, the Moscow Times reported that Russian missile strikes on Ukraine had reached a 2.5-year high in October. Russia fired 270 missiles at Ukraine in that month, which was 46% higher than the number it launched in September. Again, this is all to create chaos and cause damage to Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The Kalibr cruise missiles Ukraine may have just taken out of the skies are one of the main offenders in these enormous attacks. According to Missile Threat, the Kalibr is a land attack cruise missile that has an estimated range of between 1,500 and 2,500 kilometers, or 932 and 1,553 miles. That's enough range to enable Russia to strike almost anywhere it wants in Ukraine, especially now that it's occupied so much of the Donbas region. All Russia has to do is bring its Kalibr missiles into the occupied portions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and anywhere in Ukraine becomes a target. Kyiv has learned this the hard way many times. Russia's missile is quick, thanks to its turbojet propulsion system, and it hits hard, thanks to a high explosive warhead that weighs 450 kilograms, or about 992 pounds. Kalibr missiles are the last thing that Ukraine wants raining down on its cities and energy infrastructure. Thanks to the November 26th revenge strike, Russia may end up facing a shortage, not of the missiles themselves, but of the navigational systems that allow them to find their way to places like Kyiv. Interestingly, this most recent depletion of Russia's Kalibr capabilities comes at a time when Ukraine is doing a fairly strong job of ensuring that as few of those missiles reach their targets as possible. UKR Inform reports that the Ukrainian Navy spokesman, Dmytro Pletenchuk, recently made the point that most of Russia's Kalibr missiles fail. In principle, it remains unchanged. Generally, 8 out of 10 of those missiles usually do not reach their target, Pletenchuk said. And the effectiveness of using this weapon has been raising certain doubts for quite a long time. As for how often they use them, in most cases it's twice a month, in the first 10 days and in the last 10 days. This predictability may be playing into Ukraine's hands. Though it can't anticipate the precise day that Russia will launch Kalibr missiles, it knows that they will usually come during the first and third thirds of the month. That allows Ukraine to prepare its air defenses, which may account for why 80% of Kalibr missiles don't hit their targets. If Ukraine can reduce the number of Kalibrs that Russia can launch, along with other missiles, through its strikes on facilities that build navigational components, that impressive interception rate may grow higher as Ukraine brings Russia's missile volume back down. This isn't to say that the VNIIR Progress factory strike is enough to take Russia's missiles out of the sky altogether. Far from it. But it's yet another step in the right direction as Ukraine attacks the weapons that Russia uses at their source, rather than when they're in the sky. The same points can be made about Russia's drones, including the Shahed types that may no longer be able to fly due to Ukraine's November 26th strike. Though far less powerful than missiles, drones have the advantage of being so cheap to produce that Russia can send them into Ukraine by the hundreds whenever it wants to cause some damage. The Kyiv strike we discussed earlier is a perfect example, as Russia launched about 20 times more drones than it did missiles at Ukraine's capital. Overwhelming Ukraine's air defenses with such immense volume has been Russia's strategy for much of 2025, as Sky News reports. The outlet reveals that Russia has launched 303% more Shahed and Shahed-type drones against Ukraine in 2025 than it did in 2024. Bear in mind that the Sky News article was published on November 4th, meaning the 2025 numbers don't account for the final 2 months of the year. All told, this amounts to 44,000 Shahed drones or variants of the Shahed design that Russia has launched in 10 months. Ukraine is dealing with 4,400 drones per month, so it should come as no surprise the 464 drones Russia launched at Kyiv on November 25th are far from a one-off horde. That kind of volume is now the norm, and it's causing some major problems for Ukraine's air defenses. Sky News highlights this, noting that Ukraine's Shahed interception rate is down to 64% this year from 68% in 2024. ABC News builds on this by providing complete figures for October. The outlet says that Russia launched 5,312 drones at Ukraine during that month, not all of which would have been Shahed types. Still, Ukraine took down less than 80% of those drones. The country had a 90% interception success rate at the beginning of 2025 and recorded 85% success in both August and September. The takeaway is simple: it's getting harder for Ukraine to shoot Russia's drones down. That's less to do with the drones themselves, which Ukraine has been dealing with for a long time. Rather, the sheer scale of Russia's recent drone assaults has made it so that Ukraine can destroy hundreds of Shaheds and still find itself getting hit by a few dozen that made it through. A large portion of those drones being deprived of their navigation systems means one of two things for Ukraine. Either Russia launches them anyway, meaning it wastes money and resources on drones that are easier to take down or come nowhere near their targets, or Russia holds back until it repairs the damage caused to its factories, which gives Ukraine some breathing space after months of massive drone assaults. Either outcome proves why Ukraine went after VNIIR Progress. And with a little luck, the country may soon have a brilliant form of ammunition in its arsenal that will also allow its soldiers to take out first-person view drones on the battlefield. That ammo essentially gives assault rifles the spread of shotguns while maintaining accuracy, and it's perfect for handling small and agile drones. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show to see more updates on Ukraine's latest strikes against Russia. And thank you for watching.